Hey you, and welcome. In this video, we will familiarize ourselves with JSX typing style. So let's dive right into it. So in Reactjs, we heavily rely on the syntax of JSX, and that's what makes React what it is today, is writing HTML in JavaScript functions so that you don't ever have to write HTML separately and JavaScript separately and combine them together. That's a little bit of an effort. JSX makes it so that you can be in one file and write HTML right there. So how is that possible? So in order to demonstrate that, I will just do Command-Shift-P. We have been switching between VS Code and browser. It makes it a little difficult, so I'll just work with the simple browser that comes with VS Code and provided the path to our application. In this case, if I go back to my terminal, there is the localhost 3000. I'll just take that, hide my terminal, go back to Command-Shift-P, simple browser, paste that in, enter, and that should open a browser for me, and I'll split the screen. Perfect. Now I can see my code and also see my browser all in one shot. That's perfect. So we've already written some JSX. As we can see on app.tsx, we wrote div on line 7, and then we added hero and paragraph. Hero is actually a function in components folder. However, in React.js, functions are components as long as they return a JSX element inside it, which they do. This is the h1 tag. So in JSX, some of the rules that we have to familiarize ourselves with is in React.js, there is a concept of virtual DOM, meaning that the DOM that we're working with, DOM by the way, that we're working with is not on the browser. It's inside the React.js framework, and it gets served when React.js framework thinks it should be served. And so at that point, we don't have access to the regular thing that DOM may have access to. So what I mean by that is, remember when we would style something in HTML, let me just break this down into 2 lines. Yeah, when we would write, we would style something, we would just start with writing class. But in this case, we will say class uppercase name. So it's like camel case. And then we would provide some kind of class name, something. And this rule is that there are a few attributes that may be different in JSX versus HTML. Class name is one of them. There's another one for button components where you would have on-click functionality. It would be all lowercase on-click, but in JSX it's on-click. C is uppercase. So there's a few things like that that we have to be familiar with, where IntelliSense in VS Code will help us out with that. So that's one rule for JSX because we're working with the virtual DOM. All right, let me save that. Let me take away the class name. Actually, let's keep that. I do want to show you, if I go back to Firefox, unfortunately we have to go there because I have to show you in the dev tools what it looks like. So if I open my inspect element, click on this is hero, look over here under H1, the class name changed to class. So JSX already took care of transpiling that into regular DOM code. All right, let's go back to VS Code. So that's one of the things you have to look out for in JSX. Another part of it is, if I go back to app.tsx, remember how I wrote on line number 7 a div? Div, or just simply an open tag and close tag without a tag name, is exactly the same thing in JSX. All this means it's a fragment code. So if I go back to Firefox and show you what my code looks like, click on hero, and it's surrounded with nothing. H1 and P, they don't have a div. So it's actually not a div, it's a fragment code where you're telling JSX, I know you need a root element, but I don't want to give you one. You still can render my H1 and P together, just forget about the root element. So that's what the fragment is doing for me, is just providing a sense of comfort to JSX that I do know you need a root component, and then I'll give you an empty one, which will not be rendered out. So that's a fragment in React. And last but not least, how do we write some template code inside this JSX? Because it will be very cool if I could go into hero.tsx. Let's take away the class name so we can fit the whole thing in one screen. In the hero.tsx, I can say this is hero, but let's say hero is coming from a name const. And I want to render this out. How would we do that? So in JSX, you can take away, I'll take away hero in this case. Let's put curly braces. Whenever you put curly braces inside JSX, Now you're entering JavaScript functionality, and I can just say render this const value. If I save this, it will still say hero, or I will say John. This is John, or this is a John. So yeah, that's how you render JavaScript inside it. You can also do arithmetic operators here, 2 + 5. I think it will answer you. So as soon as you put curly braces, you're writing JavaScript. In some cases, you may start writing a function. Let's call it fn. It's a arrow function, and it will return name, something like that. And I'll call the fn directly in the curly braces, like so. There we go. If I didn't put curly braces, nothing bad happens. It will just render out what I typed, which is almost useless. I do want that function to be called, so surrounding it with curly braces helps doing the actual functionality. All right, I'll see you all in the next video.